Ladies and gentlemen, if you missed the PFL Dubai main event, the lightweight main event, the Bellator title lightweight main event, I know it's PFL Bellator, doesn't matter, whatever. If you missed the main event between Usman Nurmagomedov, the champion, and the challenger, Paul Hughes, I cannot tell you in more stronger terms to go watch it than what I am telling you right now. Now, I'm not saying it's the best fight that you're ever going to see, even in this weight class. That's really not what I'm saying. But it was sensational. A very, very, very good scrap. A competitive scrap. A down-to-the-wire scrap. And it had some issues. We'll talk about them here in just a second. But I got to say, at first, when I tweeted this, I thought that's the best, or maybe one of the best PFL fights I've ever seen. But now that I've had a little bit of time to look around and seeing some of the other ones that folks say are the best ones, I'm going to go ahead and say it. That's the best PFL fight ever. That's the best one. That fight rocked. It delivered big time. And I have to give PFL credit. They're having a bit of a good weekend here. The GFL draft, for anybody who saw it, was just an unmitigated disaster. And I think showed people that there's a lot of these pretenders out there outside of the UFC that want to do stuff. It's very, very hard to do. I think PFL comes off looking kind of competent relative to whatever they were doing. But more to the point, it's not even really that. It's they promoted this fight very well, relatively speaking. Now, they put it in Dubai, which didn't end up being the worst thing in the world because some of the Irish traveled there. But I don't know if that was the best location for it. Nevertheless, they did a good job putting these two together. They did a good job with promotional material. Both guys on their end did good jobs promoting this fight. It just worked. It worked. I mean, I'm not saying, again, it's the best fight you've ever seen. I'm not saying it's the best promoted fight you've ever seen. That's really not my point. But in terms of what the PFL is capable of doing, did they make effective use of their resources here? I would argue that they did. The broadcast itself looked, for the most part, pretty good. The commentary was fantastic. It was Dan Hardy. It was Sean O'Connell. Just a two-man booth, which I tend to think actually is a little bit smoother and a little bit better. Both guys, obviously former fighters and very decorated and talented broadcasters as well. But that fight was awesome. I really have to give them props. I'm making this video because I feel like if an organization like this actually does put their best foot forward, and we kill them all the time here on this channel, but if they do put their best foot forward and they do get good results from it, you have to acknowledge that as well. This fight was awesome. Now, I'm going to put a link to it in the description box below. I don't know if it'll work. It's to the max. If you have to be a max subscriber to go see it, but if you haven't, I'll put whatever link I can to it below so you can go check this out. So let's talk about the fight itself if we can. A 5-round decision. Usman Nurmagomedov retains his title. Again, the Bellator title for whatever reason. I don't know why they're doing that, but whatever. He retains the title. He is still the champion. He wins 47-47 on one of the judges' scorecards and then 48-46 on two of the other judges' scorecards. You'll recall that doesn't quite make sense. You're like, well, shouldn't it be 48-47? No. It sounds like I have to go look at the cards, but based on my math, it means that they both had to have 49-46. And in the third round, you'll note that Paul Hughes was fouled for the third time by Nurmagomedov, and referee Mike Beltran took a point. So that the point was lost there, right? So that's how you get the 48-46. Would have been 49-46. You drop down a point on two of the other judges' scorecards. To me, when I was scoring it, I wasn't scoring it hardcore in real time, but here's my general sense of things. I think that fight, some people think Hughes won. I'm not necessarily super convinced of that, but I definitely feel like the draw is the right call because you can give rounds 1, 2, and 4 to Nurmagomedov, rounds 3 and 5 to Hughes, but then with the point deduction, it basically becomes even. So I think 47-47 is exactly the right call. I think they should do an immediate rematch for this as soon as they possibly can. And Paul Hughes, after the fight, called for this to be the rematch, to be in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Boy, I got to tell you. Have you ever seen, who is it, Mick Conley, who fights out there out of Northern Ireland, who fights out of Belfast? I mean, the crowds are insane. Need I tell you more about the Irish? We already know that they show up for their own. They were there in Dubai. But, of course, if it's a home game, I mean, it's a completely different scenario, even with how well they travel. I would love to see the PFL go to Belfast, make the champion go to, frankly, what's sort of considered enemy territory, and to give Paul Hughes a second crack. The reason why I think there should be an immediate rematch is not just because the fight was sensational, although that is certainly true, but the real reason is that I think something is kind of unresolved, and I really want to go back to what Nurmagomedov said before this fight. He called Paul Hughes an amateur. He couldn't believe that this guy was taking himself seriously and how well he was going to do against him. And then after the fight, Nurmagomedov says to Dan Hardy on the microphone that he admitted he took the guy lightly. He admitted he overlooked him and that it was a huge mistake on his part. He admitted Paul Hughes was everything that Paul Hughes said himself to be. He was no amateur, none whatsoever. So the fight would rock. I think there is dispute about the scoring. I don't think 49-46 and then 48 with the point deduction is really a very fair scorecard. I personally don't think that there are 4 rounds for Nurmagomedov. I grant that many of them are close, and so the scoring is going to get wonky. But Paul Hughes, ladies and gentlemen, again, Usman Nurmagomedov is a very talented guy, but we kind of already knew that. Paul Hughes, for the people who keep sleeping on him, it is time to wake up. Beating A.J. McKee was no fluke. And putting the paces on Usman Nurmagomedov, also no fluke. And again, I don't know if I fully agree that he should have won, but I think a draw is absolutely the appropriate scorecard. So, what happened in the fight itself? Well, something kind of interesting. I think Paul Hughes is going to go back through this fight footage, and I think he's going to kick himself. I really believe that. I think he's going to go back through and be like, what was I doing? It looked to me, and again, I'm giving you my immediate reaction, but it looked to me that if Paul Hughes had kind of stepped on the gas a little bit earlier, this was his fight for the taking. His takedown defense, they credited Nurmagomedov with 4 takedowns, but he only had really one good one, maybe 2, 1.5. He had some mat returns that they're calling takedowns. He was able to have a control position for extended periods of time. That is true. But in terms of getting a takedown and then the other person essentially acquiescing to the position, there was really only one of those. That was round 4. He first of all, he defended a gazillion of them. He hit 2 different switches, I believe both in round number 5, to then take, or threaten to take anyway, Nurmagomedov's back. Dude, Paul Hughes' defensive wrestling in this fight served him well. Now, of course, you're going up against a very tough customer in Usman, but he was, I'm going to keep saying it. I'll look up the odds. I'll put them on the screen, whatever way they were. I think they were insane in favor of Usman Nurmagomedov. Paul Hughes was a very worthy adversary today, folks. A very worthy adversary. So in the first round, the big difference, getting back to this offensive volume issue for Paul Hughes, the big issue was Nurmagomedov just kind of peppering him with leg kicks, inside leg kicks, outside leg kicks, body kicks, kind of flicking up to the head, these quick release ones where you just lean back and then the leg goes up, no telegraph. And it wasn't like he was getting killed with each of them, but the accumulative effect, you could see, Paul Hughes, an Irish guy, he's not going to wear the sun or, skin issues very well, fair to say. So he was looking quite red, both on the midsection and in the thigh. But as time went on, Nurmagomedov kind of got away from it. He picked it up a little bit later, but he kind of got away from it. And what ended up taking over, to me, as the more dominant frequency kind of thing, was Paul Hughes digging to the body. Paul Hughes set the midsection of Usman Nurmagomedov on fire in this contest. He was going to the body both at range, and then so many times he would defend the initial shot of the takedown from what Nurmagomedov was trying. Nurmagomedov would stay on top of him or stay clinched in some kind of way, and Paul Hughes just absolutely digging his way out of there the whole time, man. Which can be a risky way to do it, but if your takedown defense is as good as Paul Hughes is, why not? Why not? And then by the end of the third, and certainly the fourth, you could see every time Hughes would land, Nurmagomedov was hunching over, which then you saw later Hughes try to go to the uppercut, both to counter the takedown, but as well as you got a guy hunching over like this the whole time. That's what's one of those great things about the body shots. You begin to bring their chin down, you begin to bring their posture down when you go to them enough, and you begin to see that. from what Paul Hughes was doing. Now, Nurmagomedov was wise at various spots to get to these control positions, even if he wasn't necessarily doing a lot. There were a bunch of fouls. There were 2 fouls in each direction. It was the third foul that, and again, I think it was an eye poke, or it was definitely some groin kicks. There was a clash of heads in, I think, the 4th round. Yeah, clash of heads in the 4th round, which, by the way, set up this iconic picture that I'm going to put on the screen here of Paul Hughes looking like a badass. So Usman Nurmagomedov did well. He had some decent striking at range. I think the activity of his kicking game at all the different targeting, legs, midsection, and head, really saved him in this fight, between the wrestling and then the fight being at kicking range, because it forced Paul Hughes to kind of fight at a further away range, at least initially, than he wanted to. So, you've got Nurmagomedov probably banking the first 2 rounds on most of the judges' scorecards. Again, we'll have to see for sure, but that sounds about right. And then after that's where all the dispute comes in. So he was able to kind of grab some rounds early. This is what I mean. I think Paul Hughes is going to go back through this footage and be like, why didn't I do more? And the answer is he's 27. He doesn't have as much experience as Usman yet. This was him stepping up to the big leagues. Well, Miki was a big league fight, but this was a 5-round main event for the title. I mean, this was his first real big fight. Man, I'm telling you, if you're going to fight Paul Hughes after this, you're going to have your hands full with that young man. Holy Jesus. This guy looks to me, I mean, you look at the future of Irish MMA, I can't speak for the broader market, but you got guys like Ian Gary, 26, 27. You got guys now like Paul Hughes, 27. These guys, they're doing real special things. They're proven to be very, very well-rounded, talented, game, prepared, technical, physical guys when they need to be. So for me, Usman Nurmagomedov wisely getting back to his wrestling, keeping the fight at kicking range for large portions of it, staying, not entirely middle portion of that fight, he kind of got away from it, but at least early and enough late, staying with the kicking game to keep Paul Hughes on the outside, keep Paul Hughes, there was obviously oblique kicks and side kicks to challenge his base and his stance, make him reset, make him reset, make him reset. This stuff worked. It worked. I mean, it's not the prettiest way to win a fight, but it's effective. And there was some striking on the feet in terms of what he was throwing with his hands. Usman had a couple of good jabs, I think, along the way. He definitely had a couple of body shots of his own. He was willing to throw at certain times, but really the magic that he had, wrestling, control positions, some ground and pound, and then that kicking game. The kicking game was great for him. Paul Hughes, phenomenal takedown defense. The body work is the most important thing he did throughout the entirety of it. Those are the 2 main things that stand out, and I really think that I'm going to say it one more time. I didn't come away from this fight thinking that Usman Nurmagomedov was way better than Paul Hughes. I'm not even sure if he's better than Paul Hughes at all. He's better in certain ways than Paul Hughes, but Paul is better than him in certain ways. I mean, they seemed pretty even to me, but the difference to me was experience. The difference to me was early activity on the part of Nurmagomedov. That enabled him to hold on to his Bellator title, and it made the difference here tonight in Dubai, but today here in the United States. But I'm going to say it one more time. This was a great overall event, generally speaking. This was the best fight the PFL has ever put on. This was one of the best fights, if not the best fight they've ever promoted. It just worked. It just worked. They give us more of this, and I will shut my mouth when it comes to complaints, because I don't know what there would be to complain about other than, hey, let's put this fight in Belfast. Let's put this fight in a more major market. But I recognize, you can't get everything you want. So how did you guys score it? Put your scores below. I'd be curious to see. You can mark me down 47-47. I think that's the appropriate scorecard, including the point deduction in round 3. But what a performance from Paul Hughes. A gut check moment, certainly for Usman Nurmagomedov. I want to give him credit as well. He certainly, when he had to win rounds, I think that he did for the most part, and certainly just had the better experience in knowing what to do early on, played a big difference. But Paul Hughes has arrived, in my judgment. PFL, if you're watching, make the rematch, put it in Belfast. It will be a promotional home run. You can't go wrong with this. I really hope they find a way to do it. All right, that's it for me. We'll have more reaction on Monday's MK. I appreciate you guys watching. Like if you enjoyed it. Give me a sub if you really enjoyed it. And until next time, enjoy the fights.